Terrance, I know you stuck this in a rundown, but I literally thought that Uber and taxi companies were mortal enemies and at war with each other. How did this end up coming about?
That's why I put it in here because I'm just as confused as anybody else as to why this is the compromise between Uber and taxi companies. I thought that taxi companies, specifically taxi drivers and Uber drivers, were fighting for more healthcare benefits, more, more protections, more insurance, more pay, things of that nature. I don't see how, and I'll just go ahead and read this comment from ABC. Um, the agreement announced Thursday comes amid of a backdrop of more cities moving to regulate the explosive growth of Uber and other app-based ride services, including New York City, which has placed a temporary cap on new licenses for ride-hailing services in 2018. So basically what has happened is Uber has decided it will list New York City taxi cabs on its app, a partnership that until recently would have been unthinkable, with both camps fighting ferociously for the same customers. So the only angle I can see in this is Uber took a hit in their usage due to COVID because people wasn't traveling around. They weren't going to clubs. They wasn't traveling through the cities. They wasn't going to work because of all this home hybrid remote work stuff. And Uber decided, okay, well, let's partner with the taxi services so they can get a piece of that taxi revenue, I guess.
Well,
Excuse me.
part of what was in that story was the fact that Uber Eats has taken off. So I'll be curious to know if they are going to actually enlist the taxi drivers to also deliver for Uber Eats as well. Uber Eats made about $1 million more than their rideshare service did last year. So and I think they're running out of drivers for it because you said New York is issuing fewer licenses for rideshare because in New York you need a special. You can't just have your own driver's license and your own for your car and your own license plate or whatever. You have to have a special taxi limo designation on your license plate and in your driver's license, stuff like that. And if they're going to cut back on that to maybe just keep fewer cars off the road, because New York really does not need any more cars in Manhattan anyway, they're going to need more vehicles to keep their service going. So taxis seem to be the
I'd be curious
normal
to see
extension.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious to see how many New Yorkers are cool with getting their Friday, Saturday night dinner delivered in a taxi.
Yeah. And like I
in
said,
New
I don't know
York.
if that's what they're going to do, but I know
Yeah.
they talked about needing more drivers
No,
to
because
accommodate Uber Eats in addition
right,
to the ride
and
share.
it's making money because according to the story, gross bookings for delivery services at Uber, not necessarily not necessarily only food delivery, but like delivery services. Delivery service at Uber reached 13.4 billion in the final quarter of 2021, compared with only 11.3 billion in gross bookings for Uber rides as a whole. So they're making a lot more. The
More
amount
money.
of people, yeah, the amount of people using Uber for delivery services as compared to just Uber rides is starting to grow. So maybe Uber is seeing this as like, all right, we need more drivers to deliver more of these goods and services. So hey, let's bring in taxis, which kind of makes sense to what you were saying, Stephanie.
Yeah, and my question is the shortage of drivers that they have right now, is this because of the pandemic and Uber drivers are actually saying, nah, I really don't want to be out there in a car like that right now? Because I know that, a big difference between an Uber driver and a taxi driver is a taxi driver has to go to work, clock in, and they are at work because work said be at work. Whereas an Uber driver I want to drive right now, therefore I'm going to mark myself as available.
Right.
So did Uber have enough drivers say, I'm good right now, I'm not really trying to drive while during this
Probably.
pandemic? And if that's the case, it's driving this, it's like, we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. I hope that we're coming out of the pandemic. Things are, seemingly better right now. So are they going to be to where this is just very temporary, and we're going to see in less than a year's time that taxi drivers and Uber drivers are going to once again be at each other's throat because one feels like the other is taking, the job and vice versa?
Well,
I can
it's
go ahead.
interesting because the question I have is how are they going to come up with pricing? Taxi pricing is regulated by the city and the state. You know what I mean? You can't just surge taxi pricing whenever you feel like it because the demand is higher. Taxi pricing is regulating, so it'll be interesting. And New York taxi pricing is regulated. And I checked because I was like, wait a minute, how they Uber is quick to add a $50 surcharge, on New Year's Eve or whenever they feel like it. So I'll be interested to see how the pricing ends up, and
Mm-hmm.
how they can, navigate that. They've done it in other cities around the world. They've talked about Madrid and Barcelona and cities in London and stuff like that. So they've been able to partner with taxi services in other cities, but it didn't. The article wasn't super clear about how they were able to manage pricing when cities may regulate that.
Yeah, they didn't say anything about pricing, but it looks like there's a third party app that taxi drivers will have access to that will be able to see Uber fares, people who need to be picked up. But I don't know how that correlates to how the pricing is going to be different if I'm in Uber as a person trying to hail a cab. I'm in the Uber app. Will I see yellow cabs versus Uber cabs, or Uber black Uber taxis? Will I
Yeah,
be able to tell the
it's
difference
gonna
when I
be
get
interesting. It
somebody?
seems like a
Yeah.
slippery slope in a in a
Bait
in
and
a
switch. I think
a
I'm gonna take my lady out and I'm getting an Uber black and then a yellow taxi pull up. That may not work for me,
it seems like a
if I'm
Right.
trying to
dangerous
get some cool points.
liaison that Uber is entering into with the taxi service. It'll be very interesting to see how this works out.
So
And honestly, when I go to New York, if I call an Uber, I want an Uber. I don't want a taxi. Like
Right.
that's the whole point. Like you can get a
There's some
taxi
swag that
anywhere
goes
at
with it.
any time, and there are yellow cabs running up and down the street all day long. And I may be just speaking from a Manhattan perspective because that's where I typically only go.
I was going to
Um,
ask you this question on that.
yeah,
How much do you want an Uber, and how long are you willing to wait? Because I think that that's part of the problem that you're trying to
yeah.
solve. It's like Uber, it might be 34 minutes before someone can get to you. I'm making these numbers up. The
Mhm.
taxi can be there in 4 minutes. How long are you
True,
willing to wait to have the
true.
Uber as compared to having a car? I think that those are going to
So
go
having the
into it.
option to call
And
a
you being
taxi if
comfortable.
it's there
Right.
instead
And
of
you
the
being
Uber
more
that you wanted.
comfortable. And, I can't speak for women, but being, and Uber doesn't have the best track record, but me being more comfortable hailing a taxi via an app versus standing on the corner with my hand up, at
True,
2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know.
true.
Does that maybe add a little bit extra sense of security knowing that I'm going through Uber, even though I'm getting a yellow cab? There's more people responsible. I don't know.
Right. That I mean
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense too. Just the idea of having that option. Like
Hmm.
you said, if the Uber's, 20 minutes away, but there's a cab right on the corner, I'm gonna hop in the cab, obviously, you know what I mean, and not wait that 20 minutes, regardless of the time of day. But it becomes even more important if it's nighttime or you're by yourself or whatever. So I hope they can make it work. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, the pricing is the only question I have, but if they can make it work, it'll just make life more convenient for the end user overall.